I did appreciate what you mentioned about Bobby's interchange with the mom, and I wanted to circle back to that because I feel like the interchange with the mom is amusing in the moment for the movie, and I think it works. You get kind of a chuckle. It's kind of funny. But I do think it's making a false correlation. And this is a bigger issue, not just X2, but I really dislike in general the appropriation of the X-Men by the alphabet community. I'm just going to say it. And I'm going to use appropriation as a word to strike a nerve, right? Taking what was meant as a racial metaphor in the 60s and something at a scientific or genetic or physically different level, mutation, or even powers like eye blasts or healing factors, and trying to map that onto different internal desires, like you were talking about, Miles. I think it's a poor and inadequate fit. Like, quote unquote, desiring different things or having a quote unquote felt identity that doesn't even correspond with your biology is not the same as a story where people are born biologically different. Cyclops didn't desire eye blasts. Rogue doesn't feel like she wishes nobody could touch her, right? It's not like we all control the weather, but Storm likes winter, and whereas most people like summer. Like it doesn't map onto the idea of LGBTQ issues. Truly, I think when you take a deep look at it,
right.
the feeling of being ostracized or being the outcast, like you were talking about, Jam.
Yeah,
I think that's why it's easy for everybody to borrow. But when you actually start getting down to the nitty gritty of what the X-Men's dealing with, it maps onto those born with a color of skin that is ostracized, or you could even apply it to somebody born with a physical disability, right? All these mutants that look different. But if you map it onto that, the only thing that might be of discussion then is someone truly born intersex. That's like 1 out of every 4,500 people on the planet. Like that's such a rare thing. That's not the conversation that culture wants to map this onto.
Right.
No.
And I think that's where I think that it frustrates me that X-Men was been taken from something that related to the color of skin and unchangeable biological issues and kind of mapped it onto desires. And
I think part of the reason for that is language. What we say matters, and how we say things matters. And we're even seeing that in the correction of proper grammar, right? Like with pronouns, we're seeing that. And so I think what ends up happening a lot of times, and I think the reason for X-Men in particular, besides for Disney owning it at this point, I think a lot of what we're seeing is a lot of the language that was used within the X-Men storyline is language that they have now adopted and they apply to themselves. And when you have, the X-Men, and that's why I was even saying, like, it's hard to have a 1-for-1 parallel with the X-Men and what I was talking about with like sin and those kinds of things. A lot of what happens is like the language that's used, they've adopted, and they're going and they're looking at it, and it's not an exact parallel, but because it sounds the same, then it's like, oh, look, the X-Men is for this. The reality is that's not what the X-Men was created for. That is not the time period in which the X-Men was created. And what is unfortunate is now the storyline of the X-Men are changing in that progression, and now is trying to adopt to be the almost like the comic book for all the minority groups. And it's like, it was good for what it was. It was dealing with racial issues, and it was based off of two prevalent figures within the civil rights movement. And now it's just like this blanket comic for everything to throw in there.
It's kind of clunky. I think sometimes it boils down to as simply as people who have an ideology just wanting to paint the people who disagree with them as the bad guys. Sometimes you just get really tired, even though they think it fits really well. You go, if you go 1 or 2 layers deeper, it starts to undermine itself if you look at these parallels.
We hope you enjoyed this snack-sized taste of Popcorn Theology. Check out the full episode using the link in the description. Subscribe on YouTube for more content. Follow and interact on social media to share with others. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.